I'm Alan Colmes. I want to welcome Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma. He has now written The Greatest Hoax, How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future. It's a pretty scary title, Senator.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I like the picture, too. Did you like that?
Yes. Well, it's certainly startling. Tell me what's behind this and why you're calling global warming a hoax.
Well, this started way back in 2003, and that was at the time when, if you'll remember, they never did submit. The Clinton administration never submitted Kyoto for ratification, but right after that, it became very popular. There's a lot of money behind it, the MoveOn.org people and the rest of them, that they started introducing the cap-and-trade bills. And the first ones actually were done by Republicans. That was John McCain and I guess McCain-Lieberman. But when we started looking at them and evaluating them, it appeared the cost of that at that time came out, and it was from WEFA, which is the Wharton Econometric Forecasting Association, or something like that. They said the cost of cap and trade would be between $300 and $400 billion a year. So I thought, well, let's be sure that there's something to it. And that's when I started making my speeches on the Senate floor, questioning the science. And Alan, I know it's hard for you to believe, but my phone was ringing off the hook by scientists from all over that had been rejected by the IPCC because they didn't buy into this thing. So I knew, at least I think almost everyone agrees, that the science is at least mixed.
Well, you say it's mixed, and that's a matter of great dispute because many of these so-called scientists are not so-called scientists, but they are so-called climatologists. And I know climatologists, and you know that you've got the UN report, you've got the organization you just mentioned, you've got the UN Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, which you just talked about.
IPCC.
Yeah, and they assess information put out by the scientific community that shows graphically the effects of human-induced climate change.
Well,
you don't want to believe it, but these are climatologists who they have consulted on this.
Well, look, no, first of all, that I know you believe it's true, or you wouldn't say it. But what you get from the media is not the science that's behind it, but the report for policymakers. What they have done, and they've done it for ever since they first got involved in this thing. The IPCC is part of the United Nations, and one of the chapters in my book, you'd enjoy reading this one. It goes back and tells the real history of cap and trade, and it goes back as far as 1972 when they had the first conference, UN conference on human environment. Then on up 15 years later is when they discovered, or they started using the term sustainable development. Well, that's the same thing on the international basis as cap and trade is. And you're talking about the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are the people that are doing this as a part of the United Nations. They've been totally discredited.
Well,
you know about ClimateGate.
Discredited by whom? Well, climate. We can go to climate. I mean, we're not going to have enough time for me to deal with all those things you're now saying. First of all, ClimateGate has been discredited as some kind of itself being a hoax. You know, phrases like hide the decline and trick were taken way out of context. But look,
wait a minute, Alan. What about all these publications? The Guardian in UK said it's the worst scientific disgrace in the history of science, and I can go on.
Well, let's talk about the actual data. For example, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's their 2010 State of the Climate Report. 3 data sets show global surface temperatures continue to rise. Air samples collected weekly continue to show a rise in the concentration of carbon dioxide. The ice sheet in Greenland is losing more mass. Trends in snow cover duration, permafrost, vegetation continue to accelerate. These are all data points that climatologists cite as proof that there is climate change going on.
Yeah, and I can go give the other side of each one of these things. You want to talk about glaciers? The Time magazine, talking about the Himalayan melting, how the climate panel got it wrong. The hurricanes, everything in here that is the sea level, for example. The Journal of Geophysical Research, there has been no statistically significant acceleration in sea level rise over the past 100-plus years. You have the other one, the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Society, no evidence of accelerated sea level rises. In fact, the IPCC themselves said it was something like the width of a thumbnail over a period of a year, and that was when that was following up what Al Gore said it was 18 feet.
In your own
a little
state,
bit of exaggeration.
In your own state, Senator, the summer of 2011 was the hottest summer on record for the state. According to the Oklahoma Climatological Survey, they've experienced the hottest summer of any state since records began in 1895. July was the worst. August also fried Oklahoma, the hottest August on record. In your own state, This is what the climatologists are saying.
And what they are saying is that you don't ever. First of all, I don't agree with that. But secondly, even if that were true, which I don't think it is, all of the people say you never want to take one incident and say that this is some evidence of climate. There's a difference between weather and climate. And as you well know, if you take all Gore's speeches, I have a long list in here of Gore's speeches that were he had to stop in the middle of them because of the cold weather.
Extreme weather.
One of the famous ones that had the Pelosi snowed out of global. That was the headlines in the newspaper. Global warming rally. That was in Washington. The Gore decries global warming in bitterly cold New York City, December 2006.
But you know, Senator, that climate change and global warming also means extreme temperatures on all ends, no matter where in the yeah, sure it does.
And where'd you come up with that?
Well, this is what the scientists say. I'm not a scientist.
Well, I've got some scientists here.
That's what climatologists claim. Also, what would be the goal? You say use the word hoax. Why would there be a hoax? What would be the goal? What would be the motivation for there to be a hoax about this?
Well, first of all, hoax is something that's accepted or established by fraud or fabrication, and that's exactly what we're dealing with here, because they put down the. Well, let me go back. You remember Richard Lindzen? I'm sure you'll say something bad about him.
No,
but,
I don't know who he is.
He's one of the top scientists at MIT. He said, he was talking about Gore. He said, to quote, to treat all change as something to fear is bad enough. To do so in order to exploit that fear is much worse. Now, I think I'm here in New York, the same as you are right now. It was the New York Times that came out and speculated that he probably is the first environmental billionaire around. And, and the other thing that Lindzen said, and I think this is really significant, he said, the bureaucratic dream is to control carbon. If you control carbon, you control life. Now, what's happening down in Rio 3 months from now? It's going to be the Rio Plus 20. That was the Earth Summit of 1992.
So the liberals are trying to control life, and that's the goal here, to control our lives through controlling carbon. That's why there's this hoax that's going on.
You don't think that the liberals want government to control our lives?
No, of course
or want
not.
the multinational organizations
Of course
to
not.
control?
Well, I know that conservatives want to control women's birth control and wombs.
Yeah.
I know that to be the case. Now, what about the fact that you got the big oil companies? They've got these huge profits that depend, of course, on their assets. Their assets are the oil that's in the ground that they want us to drill. And for the oil companies to have to move toward green technology and give up those assets sitting in the ground, that's what they're motivated by, along with the big think tanks that get big money from all this big oil company.
I'm really pleased with some of the findings, some of the things, the Marcellus up in New York and Pennsylvania. They're just huge finds right now. And we right now, Alan, I think you'd probably agree with this, because this came out from the CS not just less than a year ago. The United States of America has more recoverable oil resources and oil, gas, and coal than any country in the world. And all we'd have to do is develop our own, like every other country in the world does, and we wouldn't have to be worried about the Middle East.
Well, we all want to not have to worry about the Middle East, but the question is, what's the way to go? And
what's the way to go is develop our own resources.
Well, the whole resource would involve mostly wind and solar for the long term. That would be the way to go.
Well, they're developing those things, but until such time the technology catches up, Alan, I say this very seriously. You can't run this nation on wind and sun now. Maybe someday you can, but in the meantime, you got to run this machine called America.
That's right.
But let me just mention this one thing: those people who really believe and agree with you instead of me, if we were to have some kind of cap and trade in this country, and they're trying to do it through regulation right now, and you know the cost that it's going to be to our taxpayers. But if they were successful in doing that, it still wouldn't make any difference. Lisa Jackson, I like her very much. She's the director of the Environmental Protection Agency appointed by Obama. I asked her the question on the record not long ago. Said, if we were to pass either by regulation or by legislation cap and trade in the United States, would that lower emissions worldwide? She said, no, it wouldn't, because this isn't where the problem is. Now, you can carry that to the next step, and that is if we were to do something in this country and chase away our manufacturing base because they'd have to find the energy someplace, it would actually end up places like China and India and Mexico, where they don't have all these emission requirements. So it would actually have the effect of increasing, not decreasing, CO2.
And as long as we're dependent upon the global oil market, we're at the behest of not the president, he doesn't set oil prices, but of the global market, the speculators, and what the Middle East done unrest, and that causes the prices to go up at the gas tank for average Americans who can barely afford to get to work.
And that, Alan, is why we need to develop our own resources so we don't have to depend on anyone in the Middle East.
Let me ask you, Senator,
and we could do that in a matter of months if we get out of the way and allow us to go ahead and develop our own resources.
Senator Inhofe's book is called The Greatest Hoax. Let me ask you this. You've said a lot of things about liberals over the years. Do you have any, I mean, you can't hate all liberals. You got to have some liberal friends.
What you need to do, as soon as we hang up here, call Barbara Boxer and ask her who her favorite conservative Republican is.
Uh-huh. Now, you are on WABC Radio recently. You called President Obama an extreme liberal. You said, let's face it, this is going to sound maybe a little hysterical, but someone who really is an extreme liberal doesn't think we need a military anyway.
Yeah, what I'm saying is there are a lot of liberals who really don't believe that.
Who?
And if you look at what's happening to our military, here we have a president of the United States who developed his own budgets, 4 budgets in a row. Now the results are in. The total deficits that he has put together out of his budget, not the Senate or the House or anybody else, $5.3 trillion. Now, why is it that we're losing all of our systems? The only hits are being taken by the military. Right now, we have he's over the next 10 years in his budget a cut of $500 billion, and if we go into sequestration, which he supports, that'd be another $500 billion.
We could debate cuts, but you don't believe he doesn't think we should have a military.
No, I'd rather debate cuts. And then that shows you where his priorities are.
But you said a liberal, someone who really is an extreme liberal, doesn't think we need a military. You don't think the president believes we don't need a military.
Again, let's talk about the cuts. In his first budget he came along with, he did away with our only 5th-generation fighter, that was the F-22, did away with our lift capacity, the C-17, did away with our future combat system, our only ground capability. It did away with the ground base in Poland, and that is just the first budget. In fact, I went to Afghanistan so I could respond to his military budget, and thinking I'd be able to get some attention, and it did work. But no, he said the big cuts are in.
But he was listening to the Defense Department that basically said, here's what we need, here's what we don't need. He didn't make the decision himself. The Department of Defense said, here's where we can cut. He was taking the advice of the Pentagon.
Alan. Do you know what the title is of the president? He's Commander-in-Chief.
Yes,
and the
but
Defense Department, the Pentagon salutes and says, yes, sir.
Well, wait a minute. So the Pentagon just told him what he wanted to hear.
No, they didn't tell him what he wanted to hear. They're repeating what he wants to hear.
All right, now, Senator, just one last thing. Let's end on something we can agree on. We both agree the president was born in Hawaii, correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
You agree with that, right?
Yeah.
You're not a birther,
I don't know where he's born.
You know he was born, but you know he was born in the United States,
Alan,
right?
I don't care where he's born, because if something happened that he were not qualified to be president, by the time the courts got through it, he'd be gone anyway.
But you would concur he was born in the United States?
I don't know.
You're not sure?
I have no idea. I've never alleged that he was not.
Well, why don't you just say that you agree that he was?
Well, because I've never looked into it, because I haven't really.
He presented his long-form birth certificate.
What?
He presented his long-form.
Well, that's fine. If he did, there seems to be some question in someone's mind. I don't care, and the reason I don't care, I'm going to repeat it again.
Yes.
If we found he was not, it wouldn't make any difference. He'd still be there until the courts got rid of it.
Then we might as well concur that he was born here.
Well, you can if you want to. I don't care.
Okay. Senator, the book is called The Greatest Hoax. Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma. Sir, I appreciate your coming on the program very much.
Hey, Alan. Nice to be with you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, from the historical